is that we're all have had experience working with the open innovation competitions. And part of the ambition of when we have Alliance Day events is just to have an informal conversation among those that are champions of respective topics and invite other people to join us. As you may have seen, the Alliance Day is just for Alliance Day members. And typically we do the Alliance Day discussions, Shelly, you may recall, and others as well, that it used to start with just a coffee. Then we had it as a dinner, then we had it as a half day, and then it was a day. But now we're taking advantage of the virtual space for basically folks to be able to share conversations on various topics. So I'm just briefly going to just go around sort of who I see on the screen. We're few enough right now that I want people just quickly to say who they are in their institution. And I'll even invite the guests just so we understand. We'll cut that off as we get started. But I'm going to be really selfish, laying it out just in terms of my Zoom screen. And then with the little bouncy ball. So I'm going to start with Kumar. I'm going to start with you just to introduce yourself. And then you're going to throw your little bouncy ball to somebody else that you see on the Zoom screen to introduce themselves. We're going to go through this fairly quickly, just so people have a sense. And then we'll start with the folks doing the presentation. Kumar, welcome. Just briefly want to introduce yourself and toss the bouncing ball.
That sounds great. Kumar Garg, I'm the Managing Director of Schmidt Futures and a former policymaker. I served in the Obama Administration Office of Science and Tech Policy, and we did a lot of work during that time using prizes and challenges, created challenge.gov and a series of prizes across the administration, and we continue to use prizes as a mechanism at Schmidt Futures, including a current Edtech tools competition that we're running globally. Wonderful to meet everybody. I'll pass to Aaron.
Hi, my name is Aaron Hemphill, and I'm the Mobiles for Literacy Advisor for SIL International, currently in Chicago, normally in Mexico. I'll pass it to Donica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donica. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer at the Jakobs Foundation. And I guess just briefly, we are a foundation based in Switzerland. We've been using a prize mechanism for our global research scholars. And most recently, we used an innovation solvathon for innovative education solutions. It's so nice to meet you all. And I'll pass it to Rose.
Hello, everyone. I'm a guest. Thank you very much, Tony. This has been a lot of fun so far, and I'm sure it's really going to be great. I am the CEO of Education for All Coalition. I'm affiliated with the UNHCR as well as UNICEF. And I am partnered with Innovations Academy of Resilience, and we do climate change, we do emergency education programs, and we are located in DC as well as New York City.
Rose, you got to toss the ball.
I forgot this was a math problem. Okay, I will toss it to Molly.
And we'll just be quick, just really quick, and then toss the ball. Molly.
Thanks, Tony. I'm Molly Eberhard, Director of Engagement of Edtech Hub and sit at Results for Development. I'm out in Seattle. Let me pass it to Eliza.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliza Berg from MIT Solv. I lead our learning and Solv Ed communities. Excited to share a little bit more about MIT Solv and see some familiar faces and new folks as well. And I will pass it to Sergio.
Thank you. My name is Sergio Ramirez. I'm the Project Director, Chief of Party for All Children Reading, based here in Washington, D.C. And I'll pass the ball to Shelly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelly Malecki. I am a Senior Program Manager with All Children Reading, based at World Vision. And I have been with the challenge for about 7 years now. So excited to talk with everybody about that.
Shelly, you want to toss the ball?
Sorry, I will pass it to Heidi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Schubert. I'm an advisor for quality education with Save the Children, and I lead a lot of our literacy and numeracy boost work. And I will pass it over to Samir.
Thanks, Heidi. I'm Samir Farag. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Queen Rania Foundation. We are a local nonprofit looking at system-level change in Jordan and the Middle East, so based out of Amman. Very interested in understanding more about prizes, both how we use them and how we apply for them, and really looking forward to the discussion. And I will pass it to, is it Ayan?
Ayan, thank you.
Ayan.
Ayan Kishore, Director of the Creative Development Lab at Creative Associates International. I have been a recipient of the All Children Reading Grant and see some very familiar faces here, and we use open grants at the community level in some of our projects, open challenges. So thank you. Is there anyone I missed here?
Natalie or Jane?
Go for it, Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie Denmead from Inclusive Education. We're a social enterprise of Save the Children. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I have a home in Zanzibar where I manage a small NGO there. But I've come back home to Australia and reconnected, and I'm now an Edtech solutions consultant on projects with Ministries of Education, advising on continuity of education. And my history is in mobile education, gamification, learning management systems, and was in the X Prize many years ago, and that's how I met this community. So all of my research I've been doing over the years has all of a sudden come in very handy in some major projects.
Thanks, Natalie. I think the bouncing ball last Jane. I see Jane's room. I don't know if I see Jane though. So
yes.
She may have stepped out. And then I'm joined by our colleagues, Kim and Stephen as well. Well, thanks. Really important part just to know who's there. Again, if we'll have time for some discussion, but really getting networking for people to be able to establish relationship, who you're speaking with is really important. So thank you. I'm going to start with Donica. Donica, can you tell us a little bit about the Jakobs Foundation, sort of your exploration of this open innovation space? And then maybe I'll follow up afterwards just with Eliza to go next, because I know you've been collaborating with MIT Solv. Then we'll go to Kumar and then Shelly, if that sounds okay. So Donica, I'm going to start with you, just to give a little bit of background about Jakobs Foundation.
Great, thanks so much, Tony. Are you able to see this? Yeah, perfect. Let me just. Sorry, I lost you for a second there.
Looks good, we could see it.
For some reason, Zoom is just acting out a little bit here. When I put it on full screen, the whole thing disappears.
But we see it, Donica. We saw it when you put it on full screen.
Okay, great. So I'll just do a very, very brief intro to what we call the Jakobs Foundation Conference. And the Jakobs Foundation Conference was something that the foundation started in 1991, and it's one of the foundation's flagship events. Typically, it's held every 2 years, and we do this in person. We bring scholars and different practitioners together in person to create or co-create ideas around shared challenges. However, with COVID, we were faced with this challenge of how to do this virtually. So it kind of forced us to think very creatively about a new type of a innovation challenge mechanism that we could create as part of the conference concept. So we came up with a conference solvathon, which we held in April of this year. And this was done together with MIT Solv, and the aim, really at the high level, the aim was to co-create effective cross-sectoral scalable solutions that could provide children around the world between the ages of 2 and 12 with equitable learning opportunities. And we saw this, the fact that we had to do this virtually, as a real opportunity to actually get creative and to bring different teams together that wouldn't normally be able to come together. So we structured this under 4 distinct challenges, which you can see on the slide, hopefully. And these challenges were around 4 themes that we came up with together, what we called 4 different challenge partners. So for example, we worked with Schools 2030 to showcase solutions for quality learning. We worked with Global Schools Forum around scalable innovations for blended learning. And we worked with MIT Solv itself around equitable classrooms, and with Global Schools leaders around improving learning outcomes through data. And this process, I would highlight, is a little bit different from other challenges, probably in the fact that not only brings different teams, some of which have never actually met to co-create along these challenges. So these are different organizations that would come together to co-create over the span of 3 days for each of the different challenges. And we have multiple teams working on each challenge. And there are some teams that were established prior to the competition or solvathon. So it was interesting to actually see what different teams were coming up with, those that didn't know each other and those actually knew each other. And I can share more learnings from that process when we get to that part. The outcome of this whole process ended up in 8 solutions being selected, 4 for a grand prize and 4 for a promising innovation prize. And we had solutions coming from Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, US, Finland, India, UK. It was truly global. And we split 1 million Swiss francs across all of these 8 innovative solutions. Another thing to highlight as part of this process is that it didn't actually end with the 3 days. The whole entire thing is structured as a program that actually runs through the end of this month. And we've been working over the past few months with these innovators to actually provide them with the mentoring opportunities, with learning opportunities for them to take the challenge or the solutions that the challenge that they addressed with the solution they presented, and to bring it forward with additional thinking that they have done over the last few months together to think through how to actually get the solution scaled or implemented, depending on the stage that the solution is in. And I'll end it by saying that because we learned so much from this process, and this is the first time that the foundation has ever done an innovation challenge of this kind, this actually may now become the way that we do the conference every 2 years. So we've had a really positive experience, both from the event itself, but also with the follow-up support that we've been providing to the innovators, which I can say more about in the Q&A part of this session. And we've reflected that we think that this could really be an opportunity for the foundation to truly create more collaborative spaces for researchers and practitioners and experts in these topics to come together in a meaningful way, more than we could ever do through an in-person event, or more than we can even do in a simple conference format. So let me stop here. I know we wanted very brief intros, and I'm happy to go into more detail in the Q&A. Thank you.
Monica, that's great. Thanks for also just thinking about, in light of this platform and notwithstanding sort of COVID, the opportunity that it creates for meaningful dialogue with diverse communities. So just like this event, but it seems most appropriate. Let's go over to then our colleague, Erica from MIT Solv, just to share your experiences with the MIT Solv platform. Eliza, yep.
Sure. Hi, everyone. And perfect introduction from Donica there, sort of seeing everything in action. So I will go ahead and share my screen and just share a few slides here about MIT Solv. Right. Okay. Oops, sorry. I always do that. There we go. All right. So for those of you who don't know, MIT Solv was founded about 5 years ago, or rather 6 years ago, at MIT, really with this goal of, actually taking action on big global challenges. MIT is all about solving problems, coming up with creative, innovative solutions, and also knowing that, there's a lot of interesting innovation happening around the world that is not happening at MIT. Of course, there's a lot happening, but there's also things happening in small communities in Nigeria, et cetera. So really, we have this mission to become this marketplace for social impact innovation. So we can bring in, on the one hand, partners like Jakobs Foundation, and also bring in innovative solutions from all around the world, or just people who have great ideas and have the skills to kind of come together and collaborate and solve some of these challenges. And so I know this is primarily focused on education and learning, but we do also have a focus on sustainability, health, and economic prosperity. And then there are other sort of streams of work that we touch on as well that I can make note of a little bit later here. So really what Solv is we run these open innovation challenges. So Solv itself hosts at the very least 4 global challenges per year. And then we also run additional challenges with partners. The Jakobs Foundation Conference Solvathon is the perfect example. And then we will bring together MIT's ecosystem, our broader community of members and partners, to actually support these solutions, help them through funding, through mentorship, through coaching, through exposure, et cetera, to really help them drive lasting and transformational impact. So just giving you a kind of high level spotlight here. This one note, this is not updated for our most recent global challenges, the 2021 global challenges. So you can add some numbers. I think we're closer to maybe around 8,000 innovators who have submitted overall since 2016. The platform itself has the capability of commenting and voting and folks collaborating on the platform. And then now our portfolio is up to probably 40 or so more solver teams around the world. And we have ushered about 50 million in funding to the solver community and our innovators. So I'm gonna just briefly touch on some of the challenges that we've run. So these are the 2021 global challenges. In the education space, we've done challenges on refugee education, teachers and educators, learning for girls and women, early childhood development, most recently equitable classrooms. That was the challenge that we also hosted as a part of the Jakobs Foundation conference. And so these challenges, start with a big question, such as how can all young learners have access to quality, safe, and equitable learning environments, and then have specific dimensions that they will focus on. And I can talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A as well. And one thing that I want to mention here that isn't represented in my slides is we do have a new program called Solv Ed, which is essentially taking the open innovation model that Solv has, and also adding in some programming and support for young people aged 24 and under, really with this idea of creating a space for young people to collaborate, to innovate, to submit their solutions, to get funding, carry some of those ideas and innovations forward, knowing that young people absolutely have the vision, the drive, and the inspiration and the capability, and we can help them get there with some targeted sort of curriculum and programming, and also funding support. And I'll just end again. Unfortunately, these numbers are not updated. We just selected our 2021 class of innovators, but just to give you a sense of overall the challenges that we've run, over 21 global challenges. We have teams that are for-profit, nonprofit, hybrid, headquartered in 43 different countries. Over half of them are women-led, which is something we're definitely very proud of, and have 300 plus, I think it's 400 plus partnerships between our community members. And I will stop there for now.
Thanks, Eliza, and great to hear about the diversity of challenges that you have beyond just education. I know when we were part of the community for a number of years with the Gates Grand Challenges and would attend their Grand Challenge meetings, Shelly may remember this as well. First of all, education wasn't really that represented and just in terms of the grand challenge community, but across grand challenges, we always saw that there were synergies. And so it's interesting the position that you guys are about having a number of sector thematic, and then that might be one of the questions we talk about, linkages across sectors as well. But thanks for that background. Kumar, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the Schmidt Futures. You guys have been running a number of your own open innovation calls. Please tell us a little bit more about those.
Of course. Schmidt Futures, as it's a relatively young organization. It's associated with Eric Schmidt. It launched in the fall of 2017, and its principal purpose is to how do we use science technology in thoughtful ways against the world's hardest problems. And a lot of our work is talent oriented. How do we get folks from a range of sectors to work on these problems? And so, one of the methods is competitions and open challenges as a way to do that. We've done it in a couple of different areas. I think I'll specifically talk about what we've been doing under a program that we have called Learning Engineering. But we've actually run challenges now in the higher ed space. We have another program called RISE, which is focused on 15 to 17-year-olds. We have another one that I sponsored last year around open tools for science. So what are low-cost tools that can support technical areas? We've supported amazing work, such as the work that Solv has done. But in learning engineering, the core idea that we've been focused on is how do we take what are really rapid advances that are happening in computer science? So, both computational architecture, machine learning, and others, and advances in data science, and use that as a way to more rapidly advance the way education evolves. And so one of the things that we've been interested in is actually getting a lot of folks who aren't traditionally working in education to propose these ideas, as well as folks who are deep in the space but might be looking for new ideas. So last year we did the first version of this in the heart of COVID. So the competition launched in June of 20. It got a huge response. So we got almost 900 applications, more than 50 countries, about $1.5 million of award dollars. But what was interesting was that we tried to make the barrier to entry really low. So like a 2-page application to enter, and then it phased it. And then at each phase, there was lots of technical assistance that we provided to the applicants. So, hey, what's a way that we can help you identify a research partner? What's a way that we can help you? And so, ultimately we ended up with 18 winners in a number of the different tracks. But I think a number of those applicants, even though they didn't necessarily win, found a number of research partners and other partnerships through that. And we are actually running a second version of that competition now. Applications are due on October 1. If you go to Futures Forum on learning.org or just search for the tools competition, you'll find it, and we can of course share information. But we were able to attract a number of additional funders this year, partly because of the quality of the applications last time. So we've got $4 million worth of awards this year against a number of tracks. So assess the future of assessment, the future of kind of research, research tools in education, focus on skills on the adult level, as well as on accelerated learning, given how students have fallen back. And so we've been getting a lot of, interest this year as well. And I think we're, as folks know, we're still in the height of COVID around the world. And so there's a huge amount of open questions. And I think some of the things that we're still struggling through is, competitor, like we would benefit from doing more of this stuff in person, like how do you build connections across the applications and others? But that's obviously complicated in the current context. How do you create even more opportunities for making sure everyone feels like a winner when they do these competitions? So it's not just a handful. And then what's a way that there's really a community that comes out of it? And so that's partly the reason why we're funding a second year. So it's a sort of ongoing effort. But I would love ideas from the community on how do you sort of use these open challenges to build rather than just to have a handful of winners. And the nice thing was we were able to get a lot of folks who wouldn't have ever applied before. We got a teacher that just had a crazy idea, students and others. But even there, I often find that, a subset of folks hear about these competitions and others who don't. So we've been trying to get doing a lot of different experiments to get the word out. And we're constantly hearing from people who are like, oh, I just heard about this. And so if there are interesting ideas that this community has for that sort of last mile piece of how do you get the word out, how do you solve for imposter syndrome, we're always game to learn, because even as Prize and Challenge have taken off, I still feel like we're constantly learning, and we benefit from folks like MIT Solv and others who've been at it for some time.
Thanks, Kumar. And the lessons that you've learned, that you've talked about as you've gone along, I think is an evolving sort of state. Shelly could speak about this in maybe her comments as well, between even grants and prizes and the lessons learned. But we'll come back to that in the Q&A. So Shelly, over to you, just to tell us a little bit about the All Children Reading Grand Challenge.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. Let me just get, oh, hold on. I'm getting a note that says host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, so Kim or Stephen, do you want to open it up? And we also, Shall we have your slides as well? So if we'll multitask here for a moment.
Sorry about that, Shelly. I just made you a co-host so you can share.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, let's see. That's present. Okay, so I just tried to give a little snapshot about All Children Reading. Definitely could share a lot more, but wanted to stick within our 3 minutes. So All Children Reading, a Grand Challenge for Development, is co-funded and co-founded by USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government. Together, the partnership advances education technology, or Edtech, innovation and research to improve reading outcomes for marginalized children in the most low resource contexts. So Grand Challenges for Development under the USAID overarching model of Grand Challenges seeks to do two things: mobilize governments, companies, nonprofits, and foundations around really important protracted challenges or issues. And then we seek to bring new voices or new participants to solve the development problems. Grand Challenges for Development typically do this by sourcing new solutions, testing new ideas, and scaling what works. So a lot of the similar themes that all of you have talked about. So All Children Reading, for us, that's kind of those three areas really means that we're seeking the most promising education technology innovations for addressing gaps and barriers to child literacy. We're conducting research on the innovations to measure their impact, and then we're scaling the solutions or supporting the transition to scale of the solutions that have the greatest potential to either improve reading outcomes, provide access to children who didn't have access before, or really try to drive down the cost of supporting reading improvement for children. So in a nutshell, our Grand Challenge has a simple vision. It's all children reading, really just trying to get all children reading. Since 2011, ACR GCD has awarded more than $23 million in funding to 92 innovators. We've had solutions that support books in underserved languages, children with disabilities, family and community engagement in reading, education data, teacher training, and most recently, foundational literacy. Our awardees have implemented solutions in 38 countries, and we've also funded 19 open source global solutions that could be used anywhere in the world by any organization. And one thing I just wanted to kind of highlight, it kind of picked what the most important theme is for right now from All Children Reading, and it's really that the Grand Challenge model has enabled us to serve the most marginalized. So for us, that means children with disabilities, children in crisis and conflict settings, and children who use underserved languages, which oftentimes are sign languages or kind of languages that aren't necessarily those that are prioritized by the national government. So we're really proud that over 70% of our funding is going to these groups or has gone to these groups through our awards. I know I actually, didn't give all of our statistics or anything like that because I really just wanted to showcase that we really feel like that's the power of the Grand Challenges for Development is, taking a really strategic approach to these most marginalized groups. And I think we're excited to continue learning. We just got the results back from USAID's Grand Challenges meta evaluation, and All Children Reading did really, had a really good evaluation, but also there's a lot to learn. We've been supporting at the proof of concept and transition to scale stages. We haven't necessarily supported at the bridge to scale, that like handoff to scale. And that was really one of the findings across all of USAID's Grand Challenges in that meta evaluation. So we're also really looking into targeted technical assistance this year. We have kind of a scalability assessment that we do with all of our awardees that measures across 5 dimensions from efficiency, effectiveness, market demand, financial sustainability, and transferability. And once the awardees assess themselves, then we try to provide targeted technical assistance to help them move on their scores. And this is this round, which started in 2019 and ends in 23, is really our chance to try to help them to move. And we're just starting to measure moving on those scores. So we're really excited from what we've learned from all of USAID's other grand challenges, and then also, trying to learn from everyone else who's in the space. And we're hoping that you share our understanding that challenges do allow for this kind of unique focus on these marginalized groups. So yeah, happy to share more, but also looking forward to discussion.
Okay, thank you, Shelly. I really appreciate it. Now, I know we don't have a huge amount of time, even the earlier sessions and the later ones we have. Obviously, this discussion could be much longer than the remaining half an hour that we have. So we'll call this part 1 of a series, just in terms of deep dive and being able to share this experience. I'm actually going to jump to the second question that I had sent to panelists ahead of time to talk about how do you measure your impact, both in terms of beneficiaries and challenge organizers. I will say that one of the experiences that at least I had working with Shelly and her colleagues at All Children Reading, in some respects, even the grant versus the prize model, in terms of how long it took for that success to be demonstrated, that even the beneficiary could show, there was something more quick about a prize model and transition to scale, as you said, Shelly, than a grant model that may have taken 3 or 4 years by the time that you manifest. And that time horizon is different for an organization that's looking for funding, quite frankly, a beneficiary organization. So maybe let's just start with, we'll go backwards. Shelly, then we'll work our way back to Kumar and then Eliza and then Donica. Shelly, just briefly, what is a way that you measure success, just in terms of a grand challenge? And then maybe just a brief vignette about one of your beneficiaries. How do they measure success being a recipient of a grand challenge award? So Shelly, over to you.
Yeah, so we've really moved towards a much more targeted focus on technical assistance, like I was mentioning, and really as a grand challenge, what technical assistance are we providing to awardees that help them to move along that the scale, kind of the pathway to scale. We're also looking at ecosystem engagement and how we're really engaging, especially for the country-focused solutions, how are we engaging all parts of the ecosystem to be ready to pick up that solution once it's kind of has been tested and is ready to be picked up by the market. I think we've shifted to a much more strategic model of providing that technical assistance, and we're really trying to hold ourselves accountable to it. We've also added in an entire body of activities around CLA, collaborating, learning, and adapting, where we do CLA sessions every twice a year with all of our different groups of awardees, trying to make sure that if there are issues that they're running into, that we can be responsive to them and changing those. And then we actually, in our results framework, have some indicators around how the partnership has changed based on the feedback that has come up. So I think those are ways that we're also measuring catalyzed co-investment or catalyzed follow-on funding. So we moved to a couple of models where we required the awardees that had the more transition to scale awards. So like in the 1 to 2 million range, we required them to give leveraged funding in their second year, so that we were already kind of reducing dependence on us and moving towards, more financial sustainability. So I think we're also in that measurement of catalyzing co-investments. We're trying to do that. In terms of an awardee example, I think the biggest examples we've seen from awardees are really when they're able to use the evidence. We've funded external evaluations of all of our at least grant funded awardees. And we find that the way that they're measuring their success is often by how they can use the evidence from their ACR award to generate additional awards or additional partnerships, or go to the government and say, hey, our solution works and we can apply it in this situation. We've seen that happen, many different times. And I think just back to your grants and prizes question, it's that we've seen that prizes or small contract awards that are milestone based and results based really allowed us to produce these global solutions that could be open source. We made the requirements, they had to be open source. They could be reversioned by anybody in the world that wanted to use them, and those resulted in wide scale. They also resulted in really easily allowing us to attract partners to a specific solution. And in response to, we could do those very quickly. Like our Edu app for Syria competition, we ran during the Syrian context, and it was like conflict. And it was one that we could just jumpstart really quickly, get partners on board really quickly, and move. It matched more with the software development timeframe as well, as opposed to a grant. So yeah, I don't want to talk for too long, but
I think you're on mute.
Darn it, that always happens. I was just going to say thank you, Shelly. And I was going to say the really important point about evaluation, Shelly, that you picked up. The evaluation was for the technical capacity building of the grantees themselves. It wasn't sort of imposed as a pejorative. So I thought that was a really important part of the ACR model, which is helping them build their own evaluation street cred. So wanted to flag that. So I think I went backwards. So Kumar, I'm going to go to you. I know you're 2 years in, but what do you see as some of your early indicators of success, either from a grant making institution or a prize and a recipient point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think our philosophy has been the biggest value it provides is top of the funnel, which is it's pretty hard for us from a grant making standpoint to have a really wide lens for anyone can apply. We're both a young organization, and our grant making process is somewhat intensive. So we have a monthly model. It's just like the barriers to entry are pretty high. So we don't have that many open calls for grants. And so the competition model is actually a much more open way for us to be saying, hey, we want to increase our conversation with a lot more solvers out there. So I think it's the community build, it's to increase the number of organizations and folks who are doing work in a much more scalable way. And so that definitely happened in year one. Like a lot more organizations were able to raise their hand. The other way is it's actually a useful way for us to introduce interesting work to our partners. So we were able to put lots of our peer foundations and other key collaboration partners on learning engineering into various judging roles or other evaluation roles. And it's a way to like show the work rather than talk about the work. And so that part was useful. And then, it also created the context for a lot of our community engagement work. And so, the actual winners, I think, are doing really interesting work and will, are sending us strong progress updates. But I think the real value add has actually been just in sort of substantially increasing the pace at which the community is growing. And so that's going to be a big open question as to, do we get that in future years versus it was really useful in the first year, but we won't know in the future.
Kumar, I'm thinking about, you have two levels of sort of awards, if I'm not mistaken, for Schmidt Futures, that also the proof of concept recognition just for that early organization, how important it is for both, quite frankly, to have the recognition, but really the proof of concept one is, well, that small amount of money probably is significant, but even more so is the recognition that they could use to attract other sources of funding. The more established, I would imagine the same, but they have other street cred going because they were more established. So that might be one of the benefits as well, just early on recognition, just for an organization having been acknowledged by Schmidt Futures.
Yes, we build in a little bit of tiering, which has ended up being quite useful because, there's some people who just wouldn't apply because they're like, oh, well, we're not. And you could say, look, this is for the phase of like, you're just starting and you have an interesting idea.
Yeah. Great. Well, Eliza, just maybe to go over that same question, just in terms of maybe pick a particular challenge, Eliza, because I know you guys are dealing with so much as well, but how would you answer that in terms of your tangible measurement of impact as a, donor, grant-making institution, but from the beneficiary level as well?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to kind of talk at a high level, if that's okay. Because I think there are a lot of similarities in what Shelly and Kumar have said, and particularly from the prize perspective. So part of what we do is Solv will give $10,000 grants to every single team that's selected. And that has been really interesting to see play out because it's unrestricted funds. They can use it for anything. To some innovators, and because we have this portfolio approach, we're bringing in very early stage, we're bringing in some scale or some growth stage, fewer on that side. To some it's like, oh great, we have 10K to use, and to some it's like, this is literally if they got some additional prize funding, that could be their operating budget for 2+ years. So it's been for us really interesting to see how those teams are then tracking their progress. And so what we track and look at, we track a lot of things, but what we're mainly focused on at the Solv-wide level across the challenges is partnerships, funding, and then number of lives affected. So knowing that there are a lot of different outcomes and things that the teams themselves will be measuring, we also will look, for example, in the learning space, we ask them to track to the sustainable development goals. So some of the teams will also be looking at things that they're already measuring around learning gains or number of teachers trained, et cetera. And so we're tracking all of that as well. And we get sort of the baseline of where they're at when they join Solv. We follow up with them a few times in that first year. And then we do, from there out, we do yearly check-ins. And so what's really exciting is we're now just getting to the point where we'll be doing sort of 5 years out from our first teams that came through back in 2016. And so I think we're going to have some really interesting insights and findings that, we can then go back and report on and share. But one of the things I just wanted to mention, also similar to what Shelly and Kumar were saying, we're definitely tracking co-investment, follow-on funding. We have a lot of teams that just because of being a part of MIT Solv, being able to go out and have that exposure and go to funders and go to other grant makers and are able to really just incredible gains that they wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And so I think that's a really important learning that we've had. And also that with the prize funding, I think we found that our partners, because we keep the application and the prize funding pretty open. So if if you meet the criteria, say of the geography or the specific technology, say that the prize funder is looking for, anyone can apply. And so I think we've had prize funders that are pleasantly surprised by the number of solutions coming through that they wouldn't have normally considered, that they wouldn't have normally supported. And then it's after selection, we create the space in the community for them to work together to really drive that forward and potentially get follow-on funding. So that's been incredibly important as well. I'll pause there.
Eliza, again, sort of picking up on that the prizes, the actual funding is just one component of it in terms of that relationship or community building. So that's terrific to hear about. You continue that relationship, basically. I know the experience with All Children Reading, and Shelly may remember this as well. When we first did the first round, Shelly, didn't we get like over 500 applications, right? Of which we then awarded 31, 32. And so, Kumar, to your point earlier, that we were like, well, what do you do with all those? They were the almost ones you provided funding to, right? They were still really competitive and they were still really needy or worthwhile, but we only provided 32 awards, which even by itself was challenging. So Eliza, your point about that cohort, that community, is really interesting. Donica, maybe just to close out this particular question, and then we'll have time for one more, and then maybe we have an opportunity for a question from our other attendees. Go ahead, Donica.
I'll try to be very brief because others have said all the great things that you have learned from this. So we probably fairly new to this space in the sense that this is the first time we have done a competition of this kind. So in terms of impact, in fact, this is one of the questions that we have. How do we measure the impact of what we've achieved here? And we'll be having kind of some support on that front in a learning partnership structure with an organization actually going through the entire Solvathon process and thinking through how do we measure the impact of this work. A couple of reflections briefly. I think one of the things that we came into the process with was the intent to create partnerships that wouldn't otherwise happen. I mean, that's what the foundation is trying to do with its strategy across the board. And I think we have seen a lot of that actually happening from the Solvathon that we couldn't have achieved otherwise, of practitioners coming together with each other, but also with researchers and other experts who are helping them to develop their models. So that unlikely partners coming together or finding each other more easily is certainly something that we'll be looking at as kind of the outcome of this process, as a positive impact of this process. Then in terms of the projects themselves, what we've seen, which others have said as well, is increased awareness about the value of research and evaluation, and really embedding that as part of their model. And this is something that we're actively working with the prize winners, is to really think strategically about how to use research so that it can be something that you can continue to embed within your model to make it more evidence-based. So those are just two things that we'll be taking forward as we think about how to really measure the impact of this work.
Thanks, Donica. And again, just in the interest of time, maybe we'll do a little bit of a lightning round response to this question, and then just see if there's one or two questions from attendees, from general attendees. So here's my question. In some respects, notwithstanding what we talked about, the importance of community and research and evaluation and capacity building, it makes me think of often that it's simply just giving the funding itself. The organization knows what to do with, and is just looking for the recognition and could run with it. So I've been part of the Library of Congress Literacy Awards for a number of years. It's not a huge cash prize, but again, that opportunity for that organization to raise its visibility itself, and they know what they can do with it. So let me just put it out there. What about if it was just solely just a financial award with no community building, no research, no capacity building? What are you guys' thoughts about that? I mean, it's not an either or. I'm just saying in terms of that recipient organization, I'm just curious if you guys have reflections about it's purely just a recognition prize. And our role would be, we want to get as much recognition as we can for promising practices. Kumar, I'm going to start with you. Just, I see you're nodding your head, just in terms of like none of the other infrastructure, just a recognition prize. What do you think?
I think it could totally work. I think, participation prizes or recognition prizes have a certain value to them in an ecosystem where what you are trying to do is engender a sense of optimism and a sense that like there are new ideas and new activities out there. So part of what you're doing is sort of trying to have a drawing effect. So so for example, like in the U.S., there's been a recent surge in interest around lead prevention, with cleaning of pipes. But for a long time, I've been like hunting around trying to find people who are interested in technical solutions around lead detection and remediation. Like not the most active space, even though it's like a pretty important problem. And so in that instance, like just shining a light can have a really impact because it's in some ways you're trying to serve. I think, sometimes people, that's what they do the award and then they have a goal for lots of other effects that they're trying to do, building up the field and everything else. And then I think you should be thinking about other components of different prize design. But I definitely think it has a role to play.
Okay. Maybe I'll invite one other. Is there anybody else who feels, Eliza, I saw you nodding your head as well.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of experience in this. Tell me just from a recognition prize point of view.
Yeah, so and those exist, right? So I think there's a place for them. I will say, and I don't disagree with what Kumar said as well, I think the inspirational component is huge. And I think that's probably what Solv Ed will end up being more so, is like the lead up and the prize itself is kind of the focus, and there will be some support, but that's less of the kind of goal there. But one thing I'll say is the first year that we ran the global challenges, it essentially was that, like, we didn't quite, we were building the plane as we were flying it. We didn't have sort of the program set up for support. It was like, we have this funding, we have the prizes, and they were selected. And one of the issues I think with that the teams shared with us in that first cohort was, this is great, we got this funding, but we really need to talk to people who can help us. We really need this community. We really need the mentorship. And so that's what sort of caused us to start that program and respond to those needs. But I agree with Kumar. I think there's a place for it. There's a time and a place for it. And so there, there's multiple roles that it could play. But we found in our case that the innovators needed definitely more support.
And again, I shouldn't have premised it as an either or. It's a spectrum in terms of support as well. It did often make me think, though, that maybe additional support could be applied for social behavior change by the grant-making institution to help bring greater recognition to the organization. There was almost an important component, Shelly, you mentioned it, in terms of helping the organization on the ground get recognized and how important that was to embed that solution with the USAID mission as a follow-on project or with the Ministry of Education. So it definitely seemed like there was an area of the grant-making institution itself practicing what it was preaching about social behavior change. Like, how do you get that solution to be recognized by? I know we're going to conclude in just a minute because we want to make time to get to the other, but I'm just going to invite, just in the interest of time, any sort of last comments from the panelists that they would share as words of wisdom about a grant call. We'll keep it really brief. Again, this is part one of a series of conversations I hopefully will have. Shelly, maybe just from your experience with All Children Reading Grand Challenge, one quick vignette that you'd like to share based on your experiences.
Words of wisdom. I think just being a learning organization is probably the best that we can do. Learning from each other's grand challenges, learning from the best practices of others, from what's working, what's not, and evolving. ACR has evolved from doing mostly pilots to, really trying to focus more on this transition to scale stage. And there's been lots of lessons learned along the way.
Thank you. Great. Donica, your 15, 20-second sort of words of wisdom well, there you go.
Well, I think probably I would agree with Shelly. I think being in a learning organization, and also how can we create kind of a post-challenge afterlife? That's the main thing we're focusing on. What does that look like? Because we're all doing many things on the challenge front, but then as we've just discussed, there are lots of questions around impact and what does the afterlife look like. So that's something that I think we as a community need to continue to think about.
Eliza and Kumar, I'm going to take my prerogative as the facilitator to say your leading thoughts will be part 2 of the next time that we have this conversation. So I want to thank all the panelists for joining us today. We've been wanting to do this open innovation panel for a few years, and this was just timely to do it during the Alliance Day. Look forward to how the mEducation Alliance can help in your efforts. Again, we're a convening platform of the largest donors and development agencies investing in EdTech. So let us know how we can help accelerate the awareness of your own innovation campaigns. Kim and Stephen, you could say I concluded in time. There you go. And invite you guys to join the next sessions as well. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and we'll see you at the rest of the symposium.